Let me take this opportunity. Hi, everyone. I'm Linda Ty Schlossman, and we're live from our virtual studios in California. This is the UC San Diego Learning Boost Series, Season 1, recorded on February 4th, 2022. The Learning Boost Series is a UC San Diego virtual series of talks introducing you to leaders, dreamers, innovators, and change champions. This series is designed to inspire you with ideas that matter to you and your community, one talk at a time. Today's talk is Think Big, Start Small, Learn Fast, with our champion for innovation and strategic decision-making, Ann Curtis. If you are listening live, then we would love to have you join us in the chat with your questions and comments. Please share your questions and comments in the chat, and at the end, we plan to pose a couple to our featured speaker. If you're watching the recorded version on YouTube, then we ask you to click the like button and subscribe to the channel. Again, today's talk is Think Big, Start Small, Learn Fast with our champion for innovation and strategic decision-making, Ann Curtis. Ann is the Director of Staff Learning and Development at UC San Diego. She has a demonstrated history of working across a wide range of industries, including higher education, Fortune 500 companies, and behavioral health. She specializes in organizational transformation, leadership development, designing for inclusive excellence, and getting real about what it takes to enable behavior change that delivers operational outcomes. Ann is motivated to deliver organizational effectiveness strategies grounded in agility, accountability, and authenticity. Let's give a warm welcome in the chat to Ann.
Thank you, Linda. Thanks again, everyone, for being here. This is a very generous use of your Friday late morning. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk a little bit about this. The reason that I wanted to share some ideas about kind of thinking big, starting small, and learning fast is that we, I think, are at a point in our evolution as an institution where we need to make some really intentional decisions about how we move forward. And so I wanted to start with some of these ideas. I do want to acknowledge that in a...
Can you share your screen?
Oh, is it not sharing?
I don't see it yet.
Well, thank you. Sometimes, there we go. Thank you. So
I still don't see it.
It's not.
Oh, there it is. Bingo.
Good show now. Sweet. Okay. Computers. So in a forum like this, part of the idea of this whole series, as Linda was sharing, is to start ideas. So there's no way this is comprehensive. I know I'm going to be just touching the beginnings of so many different ideas, and my hope is that this starts a conversation. Right? For those of you that have been in any of the return to campus trainings that Terry Winbush and I have done, you may have heard us talk about the idea of a quiet revolution, the idea that if we can get together and share our ideas and share a new way of doing things, then we can make change happen. So again, the beginnings of ideas, hoping this starts a conversation. Would love to be a part of that conversation if anybody's interested. So many of us have heard this phrase before about think big, but start small. It is one of the 8 pillars of innovation from Google. On these slides and in the participant guide, I've tried to include links that you can explore for going a little deeper if you want to, so you can learn more about Google's 8 pillars of innovation. Often, I think when we hear Google in our context, we think, okay, but that's big tech, that's startup kind of context, that's entrepreneurial adventures, these kinds of contexts for thinking big but starting small, often I think mask the relevance it can have for our situation at UC San Diego. So I wanted to start there by acknowledging that, right? Because again, if you read a lot about thinking big and starting small, a lot of it is about time to market. A lot of it is about sort of thinking about the big next thing that will happen in the technology space. And that may not feel as relevant for all of us in our day-to-day jobs, but I still think that the core idea is really critical. So in addition to the think big, start small part, then some people say scale fast. Some people say grow fast. Some people say move fast. There's a lot of fast. Some people say fail fast. And before we go to learning fast, I did want to just make a plug for the idea of failing fast, which might, if you're not familiar with some of the conversations around failing fast, might sound a little off-putting. But the idea of failing fast is a key cornerstone of psychological safety in an organization. If we make it possible for people to try new things, to risk intentionally, that doesn't mean risk indiscriminately, it means risk intentionally. Say, I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm going to set some boundaries around it. I'm going to try it. And if we go into that as a learning opportunity, then it enables us to grow more quickly. It allows us to evolve and innovate more quickly. If we are afraid of failing, and if we create an environment where people aren't safe to fail intentionally, then we stifle psychological safety, and we stifle our decision-making capabilities, and we stifle our opportunity to learn from what works and what doesn't. So a big fan of failing fast, big fan of making it safe for people to fail fast, big fan for those of you who are leaders of people. We are all leaders of our efforts. So for those of you who are also leaders of people, to model failing fast, and your willingness to do so can be incredibly important to this whole idea. And that, I believe, is the cornerstone to being willing to learn fast. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is this idea that if we can simultaneously think big, but start small, and do that in a way that prioritizes our opportunities to learn from what we try and what doesn't work, from what we try and what does work, and for creating a space where we can have those conversations together, I think we can really put ourselves in the best possible position for this next stage in the development of UC San Diego. There are others that have said, well, I don't like this word or that word, or different parts of this phrase, and come up with variations. One of the ones I particularly like is this one, this idea that, well, they don't think that small is always good. They might not always think big is the right one. They have different ideas about what fast you should do. So they said you should scan widely, prioritize carefully, deploy consistently, and iterate often. And that, I think, is a really a way of putting in different words what I see when I think about thinking big, starting small, and learning fast. So I want to share with you a video that you are probably very familiar with. And for those of you that are not or haven't seen it for a while, I think hopefully you find this funny. Some things I think we've learned to do incredibly differently and well in crisis, right? The fact that we're all having these conversations on Zoom right now, and that happened almost instantaneously, is a great example. There are so many things that we learn to pivot and deliver differently for our students, for each other, for our faculty, for our mission. There are also some bad habits, though, that I think we exacerbated. And I was thinking about this the other day when I was watching my stepson's soccer game, and we were having a conversation about what happens sort of at the point when there's a little bit of a crisis, right? When the team is feeling under pressure, they're maybe down, it's getting close to the end of the game. And one of two things tends to happen for a team. Either they stay very connected, they make very intentional prioritization decisions that say, hey, for instance, I'm still learning a lot about soccer, but so I may say dumb things about soccer, in which case, forgive me. But they do things like say, hey, you know what? We're down 1, we've got 3 minutes, and we're just about to stoppage time. So we're going to put all of our efforts into offense, and we're going to run the risk of maybe stepping down our efforts a little bit in defense. But that's intentional, right? And we're going to do that together, and we're going to work in a connected way to meet our goal, literally. What happens for other teams often is that everyone gets a little panicked, and it has a tendency to degenerate then into disconnected individual efforts. And so everyone then is sort of trying to do all the things all the time and making independent decisions in a way that doesn't stay connected to the larger goal. People start trying to go directly for the big win, right? They start trying to take shots on goal that are probably never gonna make it. But everything becomes this sort of big effort and a disconnected effort. And that's one of the things that I think, in addition to the fact that we do as an organization, one of our greatest strengths is our sense of urgency, and one of our biggest challenges is our sense of urgency. And so I think part of this conversation about thinking big and starting small is to recognize that when you are in the middle of the game, you have to move fast, right? There's no question that you have to move fast. You have to move fast. You have to move right now. You can't wait till next week. It has to happen right here, right now. But if those actions happen in a way that isn't connected and isn't part of a plan, they aren't successful. And what happens is you see a lot of in this case, the young adults running full out to try and make that one magic shot. And then they're exhausted and they can't do anything more, right? And so we expend a lot of effort on these individual actions without coordinating them, and then they don't have the effect that we need them to. So that's one of the things I'm really hoping that we can be thoughtful about in terms of what have we learned that we want to keep from this experience in extended crisis, and what are some of the bad habits that maybe we've gotten even farther into than we used to, and we really need to think about those. So I want to kind of sum up those observations in a couple of notes. The first one is sometimes we go big without leveraging the need to start small. We've all seen that, right? We've all seen the multi-year massive projects that never quite get off the ground and they never quite deliver, or by the time they deliver, they're kind of past the need that originally gave rise to them. That's the big problem with trying to act big, right? At the same time, though, I think one of our challenges here at UC San Diego in this moment is that we invest a lot of energy serially without the big picture blueprint to connect us and to connect those different efforts. So one example of that for me, one of the things that really gave rise to this observation for me was seeing that happen with learning programs. There are thousands of learning programs that have been developed at UC San Diego over the last decades. And most of them are very hard to find any longer. They may have been there for a season, but they weren't connected to sustainable structures, so they went away. As the person left or turned to other responsibilities, we lost the program. Or a program may be running in a different area of the institution, but nobody can find it because of our lack of connection and our lack of a structure to help connect those opportunities. So we really want to say, so much incredible energy, heart, effort has gone into creating those. How can we connect those efforts in a way that makes them sustainable, that makes them scalable, that makes them visible, so that we can access them and share them? Part of that then is recognizing that there's a critical difference between being clear about the goal and the solution. So I've already said, hey, sometimes we're trying to rush to goal. Again, taking the soccer analogy, we're rushing to goal, and we think we have the solution. And I want to highlight that there's a difference between understanding what the goal is and being committed to a single solution. And if we can think big about the opportunities, think big about the ways that we can be innovative, the way that we can learn, the way we can analyze the problem, that will help give us different opportunities. So we all know that as customers, it's really easy to get frustrated when you ask somebody for a particular solution and they don't provide it. But if we can, and we'll talk more about this later, if we can give each other the opportunity to say, here's the goal I'm trying to reach. Now let's explore together what the solutions might be. And the same thing when somebody comes to you with a solution that they want to enact, and they say, hey, here's what I think the answer is. I want you to make this for me. I want you to do this for me, and I need it tomorrow. If we can have a conversation about what's the goal you're trying to achieve, let's work together on that solution, then we will find ourselves more connected, and expending less wasted energy on running for goal, using up all our energy on it and not achieving the end. To do that, if we can design small scale projects that connect and build together on a big picture blueprint, and if we can move fast but with deliberation, I think sometimes here, and this is certainly not unique to UC San Diego, this is a human thing, but certainly something that we can deal with. We have a tendency to think that thinking and planning are incompatible with action. We think we have to choose between those options, and we don't. We have the opportunity to both think and plan and take quick action. Again, think big, start small. Sometimes I think we get worried that thinking big is going to be a very long and exhaustive process, and it doesn't need to be. Sometimes thinking big is an effort of an hour or 2 hours that could save us months on a project. So giving ourselves that time and that space to think big first, do some planning, ask some questions, build in opportunities for learning, and then move to quick and connected action, we will actually save ourselves time. The last piece of that is then to design and commit to intentional learning, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So there's some tools that we can borrow. And again, this is the point where I can spend, the next 8 hours talking about these tools, and I would love to do so. And hopefully you'll be interested and you want to come back and engage with other learning opportunities with Staff Ed or others around these kinds of tools. But I'm just going to give like the 2-minute overview of these. The first one is design thinking. And I think it's a critical tool in understanding how to spend the right time and the right amount of expansion and contraction for different stages of problem solving and innovation. The second one is the idea of the minimum viable product. This has gotten a lot of grief over time because I think people misunderstand what the idea of a minimum viable product is. Talk more about that in a moment. And then the idea of the big rocks from Franklin Covey. So let's go through each of these relatively quickly. So the first one is a design thinking approach. Design thinking, there are lots of different organizations that have done kind of important work around this, about this toolkit and this mindset. One of them is the Design School at Stanford. The link there for you to explore more. The idea here is that there are stages in innovation, there are stages in problem solving, and the first one of those, according to this model, is that you really have to understand what's happening for your customers. That's the empathy part. And that's the big part, always sort of looks like a little bit like a fish to me. So the big part of the fish's tail is listen broadly, listen openly. And I always say it like with open heart and open mind. Listen to what is happening for your customers. Don't presume, don't start with a solution, don't start with an expectation of what it is. Listen broadly. And then define the problem and narrow down on what the problem actually is before you start thinking about what might you do to reach a solution. So that's the ideating stage. And as you ideate, you start to get big again, right? You say, let's think broadly, let's think out of the box. Let's think of all the possibilities. Let's think about things that might not work, but might teach us something even as we ask those questions. So think big, right? And then start to narrow again as you prototype. Prototyping does not mean build a full version of it. Prototyping means make it out of Post-its, make it out of pipe cleaners. When you do design thinking workshops, a lot of times people bring these big kind of boxes of craft things, right? So that you can literally make something out of easy to access, inexpensive, fast solutions. Did an exercise around this at a different organization where we're talking about how to redesign a website. And one of the groups put a bunch of Post-its on popsicle sticks or tongue depressors, right? And they would sit there in front of the test user and they would say, okay, what do you want to click on, right? And they would reach out and they would push one of the Post-its on the tongue depressor, right? And then they would pull up another one and they would say, okay, that gets you to here. Does that make sense to you? And they say, no, that's not what I was looking for. And they would say, okay, what about this one? And they'd pull up another tongue depressor and they'd say, what if it took you here? And they said, yeah, that makes sense. That's where I wanted to go. Okay, so then they could link those pieces. But they could do that in real time in a way that had very little cost, but was very instructive in terms of designing the web page. If they had done the entire design initially and then learned those lessons, they would have spent hundreds, if not thousands of hours on the effort. So again, you start big by trying to understand what your customers are experiencing, what they care about, what's happening for them when they engage with your process or your product or whatever it is. So somebody is trying to access a course on the UC Learning Center. What is that experience like? Then you start to define the problem. What do your users need? You go big again with ideas. You pick a prototype opportunity, you learn from it, you test it, and then you iterate, you go through that cycle again. So again, you are acting small by not investing in a big solution. You're building a small prototype that you can do quickly, but you're giving yourself the opportunity to think big, and that opportunity to test and the opportunity to listen to your customers, to empathize is part of that opportunity for learning fast. The next tool that we can use is this idea of the minimum viable product. And here's an example. A lot of times people use an example of building a car, and I don't think that one doesn't work as well for me in this context. The idea here is to say, okay, what is the minimum amount of completion? It's a weird way to say that, but what's the smallest version that I can make that I can bring to someone to test and experience and learn from? It doesn't say what is the least thing I can give people and then leave them with it, right? So this is not, hey, I can make you a quick solution and then that's all you're ever getting, live with it. This means, hey, what if we tried this and then we learned together? So for instance, one of the things that we're going to be working on in HR for learning and development is a coaching program. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to look at and leverage the tools that are provided by our health HR partners. We're going to learn from what they've done. And then we're going to do a small pilot. And we're going to do a small pilot with a few hours. And we're going to ask the participants in that program to be part of our learning cohort, right? To give us feedback as it happens. Then we will do a more formal, sorry, it's Friday and it's garbage day. So there's noise in the background, apologies. And then we're going to scale it. We're going to scale it intentionally, and we're going to try and learn from it as we go. Right? So in this example, they sort of start from the person who is carrying the packages themselves, and they say, hey, if we gave you something that allowed you to put it on wheels, would that be helpful? And the answer apparently was yes, because then they said, okay, well, let's test it. So now to test it, we have to get it in the hands of our users, right? And in the hands of our users, now we've just put a folding chair and a steering wheel in, right? Again, incremental development to learn from it. Okay, well, that's not really super usable, but it did teach us some things. And it taught us some things about what kind of chair we might need and what kind of additional support we might need, right? So you can see they've built some reinforcement in some different areas. And then we found the one that they started to actually like. They're like, okay, this is working for me. This has started to solve my problem, but it's not yet all the way done. And that's where you get to the stage where you get the earliest lovable. And if we can think about how we can build solutions for all of our customers, whether that's our students, our faculty, our staff, each other, in whatever your capacity is, if we can say, hey, let's spend some time really understanding the problem, and then let's build this in stages together, then we will not only be more likely to have this be manageable and not end up with Lucy and Ethel on the assembly line, where all we can do is pay attention to individual chocolates, but we will also actually work together to get towards something that is a difference maker in terms of how we serve each other in our community. The third tool that I want to talk about is the big rocks. This is a way that Franklin Covey, the organization, and Stephen Covey initially talked about how to prioritize the important stuff. So if you're not familiar with this model, basically they start and they give you an empty jar. There's some empty, this one actually has water in it, but it's sort of, give you a mason jar, and they give you a bunch of sand, and they have you fill up the jar with sand. And they say, okay, now can you put any rocks into the jar that's full of sand? And the answer, of course, is no, because it's full of sand. It's full of all the little things. It's full of all the individual chocolates. And then they sort of take all that out and say, okay, what happens if you fill the jar with the big rocks first? Is there still room for the sand? Yes, there is. You can still fit all the little things in around the big rocks, but you can't do it the other way. So you have to schedule the big rocks first. You have to give time for all of those things. It is easy to act small. I'm not as worried about that. Yes, sometimes we do err on the side of trying to act big, but I'm really more concerned about us not giving enough time to think big and not enough time and attention to learn fast, and potentially not enough time to take care of ourselves. So if we can put those big rocks in first, if we can put the big rocks in around how do we do our strategic planning, how do we think about what we need, how do we listen to our customers, how do we take care of ourselves, how do we set up opportunities for learning, then we will still be able to fit all of the sand, all of the individual chocolates in around that. And encourage you, if you're not familiar with this model, it's one of the key practices of the Franklin Covey method. And there's some other important things in it that can help think about how to include this in your daily practice. So with that, still have a little bit more time. Some of you have probably heard the quote that is attributed to Einstein that says, if I had only an hour to solve a problem, sometimes it's a life threatening or a world changing problem. In that version, he says he would spend up to 55 minutes of the hour in attempting to define what the problem is and only 5 hours actually executing the solution. There's another version here, an older version that said this person would spend up to 2/3 of the hour in attempting to define the problem and 1/3 of the hour in executing the solution. I got curious every time I see an Albert Einstein quote. I always get curious about whether he actually said it. So there's a cool site that will called Quote Investigator that will kind of do some research for you on where that quote originally came from. It did not come from Einstein. But the point is good no matter where it came from, which is that if we spend only a couple of minutes trying to really understand the problem, and most of our time assuming that we know what the solution is and executing that solution, we may well find ourselves in a situation where we have spent a lot of energy and a lot of time and most of our precious resources on designing a solution that doesn't actually work, or more importantly, only works for a few minutes, whether those are like literal minutes or metaphorical minutes. Our campus is filled with examples of programs, processes, tools, systems that were custom built to meet an immediate need. They were not connected to the bigger picture. They didn't have a strategy for evolution. We moved on to the next crisis, the next issue, the next piece in the silos. And now we're stuck with this kind of infrastructure that can't scale, that can't connect, that can't allow us to develop the next solution. So if we can spend a little bit more time understanding the problem and doing that by listening to our customers, asking why, and leveraging data to learn, then we can move faster with less wasted effort than if we rush to solutions. I think there is a very human tendency to feel that if I don't do it this very instant, I will be wasting time. And what I'm arguing is, don't wait a month or a year, but maybe wait a day to have some time to think, right? Whatever the metaphorical timelines that I'm talking about are here, right? If we can give ourselves the time with discipline to really think about the problem, understand the customer's need, ask why, find the data that we need to learn, then we actually will end up moving faster. We'll have fewer sort of never realized projects or projects that don't meet our needs. The analogy that I always think of for this, as somebody who has in my life frequently misplaced my keys, if I don't know where my keys are and I don't have to go anywhere, that's fine. I can leisurely and in a reasonable way go look for them. But most of the time when I can't find my keys, it's a crisis. I have to leave the house imminently. I'm going to be late for something if I don't leave quickly. I need to find my keys right now. So the first thing I do is I look in the usual 2 or 3 places. If I can't find it there, I start running around ever faster, looking in more and more random places until I'm like, are they in the freezer, right? Are they under the bed? No, they're not in either of those places. Sometimes I'm looking in the same spot multiple times, and I'm running and I'm running and I'm running, and I'm not achieving anything because all I'm doing is running haphazardly. I'm doing it fast, I'm moving quickly, but I'm not achieving anything because I am not giving myself the time to just understand where I was last, what is a reasonable approach, and then do that with deliberation. So I think a lot of times it's very easy to end up with things that look like they're going to be faster, but turn out not to be faster. So one of the things that I think is important as part of that is this idea of building in time to learn. And again, if you've ever been in any conversation with me, you've probably heard me say, because I tend to repeat myself, this idea that structures build dynamics, and structures build learning as well. We need to give ourselves structured time to do that. Another example from something that Staff Ed is working on, we recognize that a lot of our energy has gone historically to providing solutions, custom-built solutions for small groups of people. And all those small groups of people are our most dearly beloved customers. It's not that we don't want to serve those small groups of people. It's that when we only serve a small group at a time, we can never scale to meet the needs of the entire organization. And so again, we're sort of running around trying to find the keys, and maybe we find them this time, but without actually stopping to find the right place to keep the keys all the time, so I never have to look for them again, right? Building a scalable, sustainable solution, then all I'm doing is running around. So we said, okay, well, a lot of times when people are asking us for support, they're asking us for support in helping them with team building exercises for their unit, their department, their group. How can we enable more people to be able to do more on their own and support them with consultation so that more people have access to those tools and services? Okay, great. It seemed like a good approach. We have defined our guiding principles within learning and development and HR, our staff ed group, as we want our solutions to be strategic. We want our solutions to be scalable. We want our solutions to be sustainable. And we want them to be accessible from a learning needs perspective, accessible from an identity perspective, and accessible from a I can actually find it perspective, right? So, okay, it met our guiding principles. This is going to be our approach. We're going to develop some toolkits that are going to help managers and teams with opportunities to do team building exercises with our consultation support. Great. We can't do it all at once. We don't want to spend 3 years doing it and then release it. We wanted to build some prototypes and learn from some early trainings and offerings and get some kind of focus group support from inside our team and outside. We wanted to then build a pilot that built a portion of the overall solution. So we built a framework. We have a framework that has kind of 3 pillars, and we have activities in each of those 3 pillars. And over time, we will continue to add activities. However, if we just build those and then send them out into the world and imagine that somehow we'll remember to get feedback and update them, that will be unlikely to happen, right? We haven't built a structure that will ensure that we're going to continue to learn in that way. So what we are doing is setting up a cadence where the folks who are working on this, including Linda, will be developing new activities for 3 out of every, I think this is the way it works, it might be different timelines, but 3 out of every 4 months. And on the 4th month, they will go back and gather all of the feedback that they have received on those activities in the previous 3 months, and they will spend their next month revising. And then again, start another cycle, right? So it's built into the cadence that there's an opportunity for learning. One of the things that I always, whenever I'm talking about building in time to learn, is to recognize that those of you who are the most expert in your area are the least reliable in terms of knowing whether we have more to learn. And so again, you may be familiar with me talking about this in other contexts. Whenever we learn something new in anything that we do for our entire lives, no matter how expert we may be in anything, whenever we are learning something new, we start from a place of unconscious incompetence. And that place of unconscious incompetence means it's the happiest of places. It's the place where we don't know what we don't know, and it's optimistic and we're excited and we're jumping in. Wonderful. But then shortly after that, we become consciously incompetent in that area. And we now have some sense of how much we don't know. We have some sense of the enormity of what we don't know. And it can be a very daunting and overwhelming place. And then we go into conscious competence, where now we know how to do it, but we still require some steps. We require some focus on the tools that enable us to complete the steps successfully. And then eventually we get to unconscious competence, which means I have forgotten that I ever didn't know how to do this, right? And a lot of times from unconscious competence, we forget that it's important to learn about what the experience of other people is, because we know so much that we forget what it was like not to know those things. So when you are in unconscious competence, I challenge you to be especially vigilant about building in opportunities to learn. And I don't just mean learn and develop. Those are very important things. And thank you for being here as part of that, right? What I mean is to learn about your process, learn about your solution, learn about what needs to happen next. So if you are the one who is so familiar with the process, so familiar with how it works, ask someone who's at that conscious incompetent stage, right? Where they're overwhelmed, it's daunting. ask them what it's like, ask them what the experience is, learn from them, because they will help you remember what it was like not to know those things. Okay, just a couple more things, and then we'd love to open it up for discussion and questions. So I've said a lot of things about ideas and what I think is important for us in terms of building sustainable solutions that will take us into the next stage. Again, part of the story of UC San Diego is the 60-year startup, right? Is innovative leaders in their field, developing and designing new ways of doing things, leading in every field on the map, and building an institution from scratch. Now we have to figure out how we knit all of that together. Now we have to figure out how we knit that together to create a sustainable future for all of our stakeholders. And I'm hoping that these are some ideas that we can use to, as many of you are staff folks, as I am, how can we work together as staff and with our partners as from all of the folks who support UC San Diego's mission? How can we put this into practice? So I have some ideas about some questions to ask yourself, ask your teams, ask your coworkers, ask your colleagues that may help with this, and then a couple of tools. So questions to ask: what could be different or should be different? Where are we going? What's your 5-year vision? I encourage you, sometimes it's very daunting to think about what your 5-year vision might be. This could be individually, this could be as a team. This is not only if you are the leader, this is on any team that you are on. Think about, what do you think the 5-year vision is for this group? Write it down, and then challenge yourself to think bigger. It's very easy to get stuck from where we are. I know his eyes are getting big. It's very easy to get stuck from where we are and to assume that all we can do is incrementally change from where we are. So encourage you to think from there. Sometimes it'd be really great to get a thought partner to kind of ask you questions to help with that. What do you need to understand? What do you need to learn to understand the problem or the proposed solution? Really, really powerful question. And then once you've thought about some of those things, now what do I need to do first? What needs to change? That can help you answer that question about what to do first. And then how can we do it in a way that supports the way ahead? Again, if there's one thing, if I had a magic wand and I could sort of magically get us all to do one thing differently, I think the thing I would choose is our ability to see how we can take an immediate solution that meets an immediate need and use it to build toward the next thing, right? Instead of trying to do all of those individual things independently. And then how is your long-term vision supported by your short-term priorities? What is that key relationship? And then in terms of once you've thought about what do you need to do first, what needs to change, how do you connect those pieces, then think about what should happen first and why. Your why might be that the first thing is important to do first because it lays a foundation that enables more solutions to be developed more quickly. It could be to reduce waste and get capacity, right? If this is a process that's taking a lot of time, if this is an effort that's not really yielding very much, if we can fix that first, it may give us time to do other things. That might be what drives the thing you choose to act small with and learn fast from. Does the thing that you need to do first go first because it helps you learn about your customers, right? Those and many other things might be good answers for what you choose to do first. And then in terms of some tools, if you can define your guiding principles, again, individually, as a team with your colleagues, if you are a member of a team, and well, we all are members of teams, and then also for those of you that lead people or projects, define your guiding principles. For me, and hopefully for my colleagues in staff ed, it has been really helpful to sort of to understand that our priorities right now, they may change in the future, but right now and for the foreseeable future, being strategic, scalable, sustainable, and accessible in how we think about our solutions has been really helpful. Prototype and pilot, that's just, again, there's one takeaway: prototype and pilot, make it modular so that you can share. If you build it all as one giant structure, it's really hard to share. But if you make it modular, if you make your solution something that has parts that can be shared by other people, it will help us build this connected set of solutions. And then find a devil's advocate. If you're not familiar with the tools of liberating structures, I encourage you to explore that. We'd be happy to Linda, that might be on the list for a future learning boost session. Liberating Structures has some really good tools for how to set up opportunities for really good devil's advocate work. That doesn't mean just arguing. It means really exploring paradoxical opportunities, how to identify behaviors that get in your way, all those kinds of things. So some questions and some tools. And again, you have those in the participant guide in case they're helpful. And the last thing before we go to discussion is what can we do together? And I kind of started by talking about the sessions that Terry Winbush and I have been doing where we talk about this quiet revolution, about, if we're not in positions to sort of command institutional level change, well, then how do we change this? How do we do this on our own? And I think the answer is we do it together in our individual spheres of influence, and we connect those efforts. We have these conversations. And the first thing that we can do is we should ask always who else should be at the table. That means a few different things. Part of it means, hey, is there anybody else in this organization who does similar work, who is a stakeholder in this process, who's undergoing the same pain points? Connect those efforts. See what other people are doing to connect those. I think this was easier when we were younger as an institution, and it was easier to know all the people and all the places. Now this takes a lot of intentionality. So how can we ask that? The other thing is to make sure that you're thinking about who else should be at the table in terms of a variety of voices, diversity of opinions, diversity of experiences. The people who don't always get the invitation to be at the table can be critical in making sure that you're designing the right solutions for the right problems. Understand our customers' needs, not just their wants. We are responding to customer wants with urgency, just like Ethel and Lucy, right? We're sort of saying like, okay, what you asked me to do was wrap the chocolates individually, one at a time on this conveyor belt. And really the customer need here is somewhere presumably around, if the customer is the manager, is to get those chocolates into the box ready to deliver as effectively as possible. So when we can have a conversation with our customers about what they really need, we may be able to think differently, think bigger about the possible avenues for that. Excuse me. And then we should also do the same thing for ourselves. As customers of each other, we should really understand what we need. So if I show up and I say, hey, can you make me one of these by tomorrow? That's really going to put additional pressure on each other, right? Again, quiet revolution. We can only sort of stop the assembly line madness if we do this together. And part of that can be really asking ourselves, what do we truly need? What is the goal that we're trying to achieve? And then engaging each other in options for that. I might say, hey, I can't be there next Tuesday, but I might be able to help you figure out how to do it yourself. Or I might be able to provide you with a part of the solution by Tuesday. Will that meet your need, right? So having those conversations, I don't mean negotiation, I mean really understanding the underlying needs. We can collectively, individually, and then together interrogate the urgent, right? And understand what is important and not just what is urgent. Why is it urgent? There has been an incredible amount of urgency in the last couple of years that was truly, truly urgent and important, right? So many things that we needed to do to keep each other safe, to support our students and our community. Those are all truly things that needed to be addressed. But maybe there are also some other things that we're treating as urgent that don't have to be quite so urgent, right? And if we can have those conversations, we can make progress. And then the last thing is to give grace to each other and to ourselves. Part of thinking big, acting small, and learning fast is doing that in a way that is sustainable and that allows us to be healthy and happy and fulfilled and do meaningful work together. And we can't do that. We can't think big. We can't even act small in productive, connective ways. And we can't learn fast if we don't give each other the space to be well and whole. So with that, thank you so much. I hope that some of this sparks some ideas or some conversations. Would love your feedback and thoughts. And Linda, I'd love to hear what questions are.
All right, thank you, Anne. We have been taking questions and comments in the chat. And let me put this back up so you can see. I'm going to put in the chat, there has been one comment. With our remaining time, I think we can answer this, and maybe one more we'll try. So the comment is that 5-year vision question. It brings up lots of feelings. You saw it in my own face, and then there were some in the chat too. It brings up lots of different feelings, and it does feel like a big step. So how do you make that feel more like a manageable step, a tool or tip to help us get started?
That's awesome. Thank you so much for asking that question. So I think that the reason that the 5-year vision feels so big and overwhelming is that we're already thinking about what solutions that would involve. And as soon as we're thinking about what solutions that would involve, we're thinking about the work it would take and the effort to move things and who you'd have to get to agree to it and all that kind of stuff. And this, I'm so glad you brought this up. When you ask yourself for that 5-year vision, there's no accountability to it. It's truly like, what if you had a magic wand? If you had a magic wand and you didn't have to do any of the work and you didn't have to worry about any of the obstacles or any of those things, what would it be like? Right? And that could be as sort of technical as, I would have a different way to do this. I don't have any idea how that would happen, right? We would have a different way to magically make it so that I could just say out loud, I want to learn about blah, blah, blah. And then a vision would appear of how I could learn that, right? Like sort of just making things up. It could be, I want to work in this institution in a way that makes us feel like we can be effective, right? Like, I mean, it could be anything, right? Anything that you like, what is your heart's desire? What do you believe is needed? But not worrying at all about what it would take to get there. And that's where I think a lot of times what happens is we get daunted by the solutioning. And so we start smaller or we think smaller, right? So again, think big. Like, what would the magic be? You are not accountable to that. That is for you, right? You are not accountable to it. You are not beholden to what those answers are. This is not the strategic plan you present to your boss. This is just, what would your job be like? And the reason that we pick 5 years, which seems so big, is that it seems so impossible, right? It seems so impossible to imagine 5 years from now, right now, that it kind of pushes you into that space of possibility, right? If you pick 1 year or 3 years, then it kind of feels like it's got to be practical and reasonable. And the goal for this is not actually to think practical and reasonable. It's to think big. You're still going to act small. You are not going to tackle that all at once, right? You're going to take one small little piece and you're going to build a prototype and you're going to play around with it and you're going to talk to your users and you're going to see how it works and you're going to build from there. And you're going to do that in collaboration with other people who are working on similar problems. That's the vision. And that's my vision, right? In that 5 years, we all know how to find the people who are working on similar things. I don't know how to do that yet, but that's part of my 5-year vision, right? Is that when I'm like, here's a problem I have in my area of the university. How do I find the other people who have similar challenges and that I'm easily and magically able to do that? That's something I would love to see happen. No, not the foggiest idea how to do it yet. I hope that helps.
Thank you. I think we have time for a 2-minute answer. Here's the 15-second question. Regarding slide 12, where you showed building in time to learn, this makes sense and it is hard to do. Why is it so hard to build in time to learn here at UC San Diego? And by extension, why is it so hard to stop and plan? How can it change? Who changes?
That's a great question.
2 minutes and solve the world.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping that this is one of the, so there's so many answers to this. So the first one is, we don't really have that muscle developed here, which is always fascinating at an institution of higher learning, right? That we have so many structures around learning, but not so much for our internal processes that support our operations and so on. So the first thing is to recognize that we have to build that muscle, and it's not going to happen overnight, right? So how can it change and who changes it? It's us individually and getting together. One of the things that I think can be so powerful is when we develop kind of little communities of practice around this stuff. So if you have a project that you're working on, you have an area that you're trying to improve, get a group together that commits, that schedules the big rocks to meet on a regular cadence, holds yourself accountable to that, and has a conversation truly just about lessons learned, and that uses structures to support that. Again, liberating structures can be helpful. There are design thinking structures that can be helpful for that kind of learning pattern, right? So that's a huge part of it. The sense of urgency, and that's why the idea of the assembly line, we are stuck on the assembly line and we are going to have to step away. We are going to have to at some point say, stop the assembly line, let's take that time. Right now, I think we've backed ourselves into a scenario where it feels impossible to take an hour. So again, thank you for being here. It feels hard to take a day, but schedule the big rock. Schedule a day with your folks. And this is part of that kind of team building and another tools. We're working on tools to help you with that. We're here to consult. Linda and Kim Green regularly schedule spots for, I love that, Renese, the 30-minute consultations, right? So that you can reach out to them and get support for how you can build in learning reflection opportunities. That idea of a monthly focus day is brilliant. And yes, and so that's some of the bigger rock pieces. Kathy, your idea about the time to review lessons learned and the giving the chance to learn from the failures. Staff meetings, take 5 minutes at the beginning of a staff meeting and go around and say, what have you learned about our processes this week? What have you heard from our customers? What ideas you have? What did we try that didn't work? What can we learn better next time? So it can be little bitty pieces and big pieces. And I know I'm out of time, but please, I would love to have these conversations. If anybody's interested in getting together and having more of these conversations, I would be happy to schedule a big rock for that. So if anybody wants to get together, just email me and maybe we can set up, or if somebody wants to take the initiative and just set up a time. And I would be loved to be invited if you'll have me.
Thank you so much, Anne, for being here today. If you do have questions after the talk, you can write to Anne or you can send us an email at staffeducation@ucsd.edu. And for those joining us live, I've put in the chat links to our next 3 talks. February 23rd, Resiliency in the Age of Uncertainty with Pierre Kawand. March 4th, Conversations about Change, Crucial Conversations in Action with Rachel Almodovar. And then March 23rd, Talking about Race, Learn, Leverage, Lead with Cultural Competency with Dr. Sean Travers. So I want to say in closing, thank you very much, Anne, for being here today. Thank you everyone here for being live with us. UC San Diego Learning Boost Series, we're here for you to learn, to give you a small and mighty learning boost, to leverage, to inspire you to leverage inspiration into bite-sized risk-taking, and to lead the way towards richer, more meaningful conversations. You are the connection point between an idea, a philosophy, and a practice. Thank you very much.